Hi, welcome to Project Geospatial. I'm Adam Simmons, and thank you everybody for attending and watching Let's Talk Geo. This session is where we interview interesting individuals from the geospatial community, the industry as a whole, and this round we've brought on Ella and Alex Herz. How about you both introduce yourselves, and we'll get the discussion started with the lunch talk with LX, as we've named it.
Right. So we're from Orbit Logic, and we'll get to ourselves after we introduce the company. So Orbit Logic as a company focuses on mission planning and scheduling for space. It's very niche in that it's mission planning and scheduling, but that aspect is there for any type of mission, any phase of mission. So people have used our software for anything from launch scheduling, contact scheduling, collection planning for looking at the Earth, and observation scheduling for looking at space objects. And we span everything from applications that run on a watch to a mobile app to web to servers and even onboard the satellite, but it's all based on mission planning and scheduling. Alex and I are two of the three founders. We both are on the systems engineering and program management, product management side. The founder who's not here in the room with us is Doug George, and he's more on the software side. So he's all the way to software. Alex is fairly on the spacey side, and I'm a little sort of in between.
That's right. And Ella talked about the different mission phases and different mission types, but it's also, we support civil space, commercial space, DoD, so kind of across the board. Everyone needs scheduling if they're doing operations. So.
Yeah, no, that's great. So how you want to talk a little bit more about how the company started? I think before in the pre-show, you're saying how the company is 20 years old, but I'll be honest, some of the features and services that I've heard about from Orbit Logic or Orbit Logic as a whole has been only in the last maybe 5 years or so. So at what point do you think you got this kind of big awareness emerge from what the company is too, from who you are?
You want to tell the tale?
Sure. So, we started out in Houston at the Johnson Space Center. We both worked there
We know each other from Cornell.
Yeah, we know each other from college. And so we met there, moved down to Houston, started working at the Space Center down there. That's how we got involved in the space industry. And after that, we moved up to DC and did some work there for a few years. Which is where you met Doug. Which is where I met Doug. Yeah, I was working for another company in Greenbelt near Goddard, and met Doug. And around late 99, 2000, things happened at my company where I wasn't super comfortable there anymore, and we were doing projects and bidding on whole ground systems, and I was managing all those efforts and those bids. Ended up leaving that company and starting Orbit Logic, thinking we were going to do work with COTS-based ground systems for satellites. That was kind of the initial thought for Orbit Logic, and we did some of that. But then very quickly we found this need for planning software. And we kind of filled that gap in some of our solutions and found that people kept coming to us for that. So we kind of became specialized in mission planning software very early on. Our first product, SDK Scheduler, came out in 2001. We partnered with Analocal Graphics, AGI, makers of SDK, for that. And ever since then, it's been pretty much all about mission planning and scheduling software.
Sorry, that's very interesting you mentioned SDK, because I'm very familiar with it. When I was working in the Air Force and in the NRO, and I think a lot of folks know AGI as SDK. I had no idea they partnered with you all to get that started. Do you still build that product and work with them on it?
Yeah. So, and this is the thing that a lot of people are confused by. So, SDK Scheduler is an additional module that's added on to SDK. So if you're familiar with SDK, they have a bunch of different modules. One of them is SDK Scheduler, and that actually comes from us, Orbit Logic, and we still maintain that, and we still partner with them and do a lot of work with AGI.
Anything that you can compute in SDK, you can use as a constraint for scheduling in SDK Scheduler.
That's right, with no new coding. So it's a very powerful add-on module for them. But when we first developed it in 2001, we were a complete unknown. We were a brand new company. And so the partnership with AGI, we intentionally made it look like, hey, this is just another piece of SDK, right?
Because they've been around since then.
They've been around forever. SDK had been around, was well established. And so this was an add-on module for that. And they, of course, have a great marketing team. And so they were able to really help us get that product going. And it's been a great partnership, and it continues. We continue to advance SDK Scheduler, and we're about to put out a web version of it. And yeah.
So, just a quick little backup for our audience there. SDK stands for Satellite Toolkit. And
Systems Toolkit.
Okay.
Satellite Toolkit. Yeah.
Well, so there's a little update for me.
Because they do more than just space. They do UAVs and UUVs and whatever you want. Yeah.
Yep.
So let's get into some of the other products and services that OrbitLogic gets involved with. So more than just that, you've evolved significantly, correct?
Yeah. So it's all about planning and scheduling. We kind of have two sides to the business. SDK Scheduler is a very versatile tool that you can use for any type of project. Because SDK is so versatile, it has a lot of capabilities in a lot of different domains, anything you want to do. It doesn't even require SDK. You can use Scheduler without it. It can do kind of anything. And so SDK Scheduler is used for things like the launch scheduling and contact scheduling, full mission planning for missions like Cygnus. The other side is more on the collection planning side. Where we have our collection planning analysis workstation, CPAW, OrderLogic, which is a web-based tool, SpyMeSat, which is a mobile app, and then there's also APS, our onboard autonomous planning system, which actually runs on an asset. Those various different products they're COTS for sure. We have various different customers who buy our software just completely off the shelf. They do all the integration and everything themselves, and it's just product for us. And then we have that's like SGSS, the next generation TDRS, General Dynamics licensed SDK scheduler, but they built this whole system and web front end that goes around it to do the next generation TDRS scheduling versus Bridgecom, which is a commercial laser communications network. They came to us. We did our own custom web UI with them. Now it's laser communications. We added in clouds. We added in event triggerings, but it's still based on the COT software. Landsat is another version where it was custom. Landsat wanted us as part of the team, so they took CPAW and SDK Scheduler, and we did all the integration with the other partners, like AS Solutions and Hammers.
Yeah, but the difference, so SDK Scheduler existed. That was our first product. CPAW evolved and kind of broke off as a separate thing, very early on, specifically for collection planning for imaging satellites, because there were some specialized problems, there was some specialized modeling, there was some interaction between the algorithms and the modeling that had to happen that weren't really well supported at the time by SDK Scheduler and SDK. And so we developed a separate product for that, so specifically for imaging satellites and that kind of planning. So there's the SDK Scheduler part, which we apply to a lot of problems, but if anyone utters the word imaging satellite or remote sensing satellite or anything like that as part of the conversation, we immediately start thinking, oh, this is a CPAW-based solution. So it's kind of a different side of our house there.
And then the web front end with OrderLogic extends that so that you can have multiple users, you can have authentication levels, that type of thing. And then SpyMeSat pulls it down to the phone level, and that's SpyMeSat is available to just regular old people, anybody who wants to get satellite imagery. We had a picture in my mom's house from 2003. It's a picture that GeoI took of the University of Illinois, where my mom lives. They were doing a college campuses thing, and we got that picture of my mom, but it was really hard to do. It was very hard. And we're like, well, we do collection planning. How hard can it be to get satellite imagery? Well, it was hard. Like, we had to call people that we knew and stuff like that. And so we developed this mobile app, and then we made it available to the regular public so that anybody can get satellite imagery. And now we get calls from people who are doing like their archaeology and stuff, or solving crimes, doing insurance, that type of thing.
I have to say, I really admire what you all have done, because you are one of the few, if not the only ones, that put an app out there to put collection and ordering in the hands of regular people.
Right.
Yeah, and we got a patent.
And that was totally customer driven. Yeah, we do have patents on it. But it was, initially the app was just showing you overflights of imaging satellites, right? And so here's all the commercial and unclassified imaging satellites. Here's when they're flying overhead and could be imaging your location. So it's kind of this fun app that we put out there. And it became very popular, got a couple of good reviews and some different, app blogs and things like that, lots of downloads. And then people started asking, well, okay, you're telling me when the satellites are flying over, how can I get the imagery? And so that drove us to putting in place reseller agreements with the different operators and making that archive imagery available. And then after that came out, that was popular. And then we got people saying, well, what if I want a new image, right? So then we put new tasking into it. So it's a great app. It has a lot of capability, and it was entirely, public driven, based on feedback.
We get purchases every day, and then the other customer feedback was that the government then wanted it. So we did a custom version of SpimeySat, the public app, for the government, because the government has already paid for a lot of that imagery, and so they don't want to have to go in with their credit card or their Apple Pay.
They wanted it accessible through the mobile app.
Yeah.
So
and now we have a number of customers that are really interested in using a mobile app for tasking and to have that capability. Tell them about what we're doing for DARPA Blackjack.
Yeah, so it's part of the work we're doing on the DARPA Blackjack program is to provide that user interface via a mobile app for tasking requests and looking at the status of those. And so that's part of that whole system. And that's hooked in with our onboard autonomy. So the whole constellation, using our APS software, the constellation is making its own decisions about how to take those images that are ordered from that mobile app. So
it goes pretty much directly from the mobile app straight to the constellation.
That's right. So there's no centralized place where planning is done on the ground in that solution. So we have the user side with his hand on an app, and we have the satellite, the whole constellation coordinating with each other to collect those images and deliver them back.
I think you just proven with a couple of these examples you just talked about how much there's just a huge still white space in streamlining these traditionally complicated processes or complicated workflows into something more simplistic, especially users I just want to do this simple, that doesn't have to be a one button solution, but I just want to be able to do this simple thing. And just to be able to do it on my phone, I think forces people to think about this kind of streamlined workflow for what is traditionally a more complicated, big, giant beast of a program.
Right.
Yeah.
Thoughts on that?
And there's some people like the phone because they're out in the world, but other people are chained to their desk and they're using more like a web application. That's where our Order Logic software comes in, because they're in a secure environment or they're just sitting there and they're sitting in front of their computer. And so we have it where the mobile app is the most simple. The web application is customized so you can make it so that you have the simple user interface that you allow to certain people. You have more complicated, more nerd knobs for people who understand that type of thing. With that web application, it's very easy to separate customer A from customer B or organization A from organization B. And then that all feeds into the really hard stuff that we do, which is the optimization across like heterogeneous collection of assets that have different capabilities to fulfill those orders. And what's interesting is the same software that we use for imaging, for collection planning for imaging the Earth, is the exact same software and system that we use for collection planning for space situational awareness or tracking objects in space. So we do the sensor planning for looking at various different space objects, and we use the optimization to weight factors like, do I want to spend more time looking for new objects, or more time characterizing objects, or more time just keeping custody and reducing covariance. And we have some specialized factors in our multi-factor figure of merit that's used for scoring the optimization. But like other than that, it's really just configuration and looking down.
But the user doesn't have to worry about any of that, right?
Yeah.
So the user, like getting back to the mobile app, it used to be that when you were ordering a satellite image, you had to have a big commitment and a big contract with one of these operators, right? So you had to be willing to spend a lot of money over a year or 2 years or whatever. And even in that case, when you wanted to order a new image, there was a whole form you had to fill out with essentially the equivalent of all those nerd knobs, like, what kind of bands do I want, and what kind of resolution, and all these different things, and then you'd send that in.
Yeah, the worst part is you had to talk to a real person.
Right, you'd send that in,
and they ask you the same questions.
They do a feasibility, and they get back to you in a few days, and then maybe you confirm the order, and then they might get it into their planning system a week later or something, right? And what we did, especially for the mobile app, was say, look, this mobile app it's a consumer app. Some people may know what they're doing with satellite imagery, but the great majority are going to have nothing. They're going to have no knowledge of how satellite imagery works, but they know what a good picture looks like, right? So just default the things to, okay, yes, they want a color picture. Yes, they want the best resolution. Yeah, they wanted a JPEG on their phone, or they want a GeoTIFF for their GIS application, right? So just a few little options. You specify the location, you specify the size you want, boom, hit a button, right? So,
and I'd argue that 90% of users they have this kind of default set in their mind of what they want that is standardized across the board. The extra options, people say, oh, we don't know what the customer wants. That's not true. You don't have to ask for these different bands of SAR or hyperspectral. They probably want these things unless they ask for something otherwise.
Right.
Sure.
Right.
Sure. Yeah. And so we, part of the design of that app was, okay, we have to make it simple. We got to get rid of all these options. Well, we don't get rid of them, but you default to the things that most people are going to want. Right?
Well, and the fact is as COTS as we are, that we've made these sort of standardized interfaces. So we have a number of different assets or spacecraft in SPIMESat, for example. So SPIMESat, you can do archive and tasking for Maxar, for Planet, for CompSat,
ImageSat.
and ImageSat for a number. We have both archive and new tasking for a number of different places. And so we act sort of as a broker. And from the user standpoint, that all looks exactly the same. We have specialized agreements with each one of the different providers, but we kind of take care of that behind the scenes.
Different interfaces.
Yep.
Yeah.
But everybody has a standard end user license agreement for how you use their information. We've made it so that Maxar and Planet don't have to have the exact same EULAR, license agreement, but they both have one. So that's an app, and it's just that easy. And anytime we want to add a new provider, it's super easy. We had one customer that wanted some SAR imagery, and so we're like, well, we already work with CompSat. They have CompSat 5. That's SAR. Let's do that. So we kind of back end work through our interfaces, and we got it to work for that one project. And within a month, it was in the app, and now regular people can order SAR imagery.
Yes, but I think that same philosophy of keep it simple for the user and give the user what they need, but shield them and insulate them from the complexities of how the planning is done, but provide them good insight into turning those knobs and specifying their preferences so that can be reflected in the algorithm planning and the optimization.
Sure.
So they get plans back that they like.
So with all these applications and services that you provide, talk to me about the evolution of a lot of the emerging technologies out there. Obviously, in the last 10 years, we've had this emergence of cloud-based architectures out there, or for machine learning best practices that are coming out and higher demand with those types of things. How are you adapting to the current technology demands that people have for what you've developed in the last 20 years?
Yeah, absolutely. So some of that is driven by specific customers asking for things. Right now, we have one customer that wants everything containerized. actually sort of one customer is really driving it, but we're doing it for all of our customers because it's a new technology. And so we're sharing across the various different products that we have. And as that one group moves to the future, then when somebody goes, hey, do you guys do containers? We go, yeah, we did it once, and now we've started to do it all across the board. So that's one of the new technologies. Another one, some of the other ones are driven by SBIRs. We were just selected.
Before we get to those, let's talk about the cloud. So so the cloud stuff, our SPIMESAT server has always been in the cloud, in the bucket and everything. So we've been integrated with cloud technology for a while, and it has helped us avoid needing to build up our own physical server farm. So we use the cloud for a lot of our testing. And so we've been, ever since like AWS and other clouds have been available, we've been leveraging those to reduce our need to have server hardware, basically, right?
And to expand and scale.
So we've had to learn how to deploy in those, and then taking advantage of the fact that, hey, I can get 16 cores, but I can also get 32 cores or 64 cores or 128 cores or 256 cores. And how do I take advantage of that in my collection planning and other scheduling activities to make it faster and more optimal? So we've been doing that since the beginning of cloud availability.
Right, which allows you to, Alex is talking about cores, but then that equates to how many satellites you have. So, once upon a time, going from 1 to 2 satellites was a huge deal, and then going to 3, and now, we do demos, on almost a daily to weekly basis where people are like, oh, we got 10, we got 20, we got 200, and we just pop them into the software, reconfigure, we kind of figure out what size.
And when you say it's a big deal, how was that complicated before compared to what it is now? Why is that a big deal?
Well, we had to.
I know that sounds like a simple question, but I'm thinking about the audience.
No. So I can remember back in the days, like when we went from GeoY1, it was a GeoY1 to GeoY2 or Worldview 1, going from Worldview 1 to Worldview 2, for instance. Now you're talking about, okay, well, it was all like hard-coded for the individual spacecraft. Now we have to have 2 spacecraft. And then when you added in when we added in Worldview 3, it was like super fast. I mean, it was just, you have to create the plug-in points within your software and in the architecture that allow you to add in different capabilities. And so you go from, hey, we just have a base capability to now we have a plug-inable capability.
So and the other, they didn't have these standardized access points or APIs for each satellite. It was all.
Yeah, I mean, it used to be. Let's be realistic. It's still this way in many places that each satellite is a stovepipe system. It has its own planning system and everything. But more and more, you have to get away from that, right? So, when we started expanding to multi-satellite planning for I guess originally Orb Image and GeoEye Digital Globe, we had to figure out that architecture and how to design to be scalable, so that it was, easier to add additional satellites to the system. And we've gotten to the point now where we can deploy software and customers can do that themselves.
Yeah.
Add a new satellite.
Which is another interesting point, because as a COTS is an interesting place to be. In some ways, everybody's like, oh, COTS is the best. I'll just buy something off the shelf. But there's a lot of places where COTS isn't really COTS, and there's so much integration that you have to do. And then the worst thing in the world is modified COTS, where they have to change the core structure of this supposed off-the-shelf software. We try to be on the other side of things, where we have a product that is complete and whole, and there's integration points. And so our product is a little like Microsoft Word or Excel or something like that, where you have a bunch of capabilities. And then the interesting part, the mission specific part, is kind of similar to what you put into your spreadsheet, right? Like Microsoft doesn't know what you put into their spreadsheet. They don't have to do anything different. And that's the same thing for us, is that for each mission, the mission can own all that customization and add-ons and connectivity, and we have these nice plug-in points. So that means that the COTS provides this base capability for this really high-fidelity scheduling and all this capability that you can do there. But there's a place for the mission to own their own stuff,
right.
and they don't have to worry about us going out of business or needing to come to us for every little thing.
Right.
Yeah. No, I think that's a tough thing when folks rely on a service and they're not sure if it's going to be there the next day. Even some of the Microsoft services, when they're in, think about the Microsoft Suite. Now that everything's online, it's not so much COTS as it much used to be. And of course, as a government customers, you have a lot of folks with disconnected ops. They need to take these things and run with it with their own server farms or in their disconnected.
Yeah, and we've had to make sure we take that into account, especially for things like visualization and map views. You can't necessarily go to the internet and get Google, right? So
we have a customer doing a demo. They want a demo instance of like everything. So we have a version of our software for or a project that's set up that has ordering from the mobile app and the web app, doing the optimization on the ground for kind of long-term planning, and then autonomy and replanning on board for flight software. So if you sense something or you get a high priority like quickie request, it does it there. So we have this whole system that's like everything we do. And then we have all integrated, and we have this new customer that's behind a wall that's like, hey, can we just try that out? And we're like, okay. And so they have no ability to do any type of video conferencing for installation. It's a pandemic, so we can't go there and set anything up.
No internet connectivity.
No internet connectivity besides us being able to, put it onto their secure.
It's been a good exercise.
And so we had some of our employees testing things out or whatever, but we're handing them over to them this week. This is a free demo trial for them to look at it and to play with our stuff. And we're not going to be able to like touch it or do anything.
So is it dumbed down enough for it's basically just a hard executable install and then follow these instructions?
Yep,
right.
Exactly.
Right, exactly. And by the way, yes, all of that, but also the software can't go get an update from the internet for anything, right? So you have to really make sure that your install and your documentation and all that stuff is really self-contained and complete.
Yeah, the level of professionalism and completeness that we have to have for those customers that have no connectivity is we just have to do that.
No, it's taking a lot of the things that we left behind in the 90s for software management and upgrades from individual systems and making sure those get carried forward still. A lot of folks are trying to forget those things, but there's a lot of reasons to maintain those. Can I run an upgrade? Can I just plug a thumbstick in or run a disk in just to install an update to this package that I have?
Right.
So no, that's great. That's amazing that you're another kind of, you mentioned containers. I'm assuming you mean Docker containers for Dockerizing some of the applications you have. Are you getting involved with other technologies such as blockchain at all?
Yeah. So we have a few different, some of that newer technology is also driven by SBIRs. We have SBIRs with DARPA have had DARPA, the Navy, NASA, Air Force, AFRL. So we were selected for a NASA STTR coming up for blockchain technology. And so that's sharing state between a collection of assets using that security that you have with blockchain. And that's going to be a move forward for us. And
well, what's interesting is we've solved that problem without blockchain, right? But now we're able to say, okay, so we have this constellation coordination solution that's done, I don't know, maybe a little janky, without blockchain, and now we're applying blockchain, which is kind of going to more formalize it and make it more secure. And so it's a really interesting application of blockchain.
Can you be more specific to what you just said? So what's the advantage of using or bringing on a technology to blockchain to what you're doing?
Well, like I said, I think it makes it more formal and secure and controlled than just, I don't want to say a hack solution or something.
Open messaging.
Right. So it's being more standardized and more secure, and just in general, I would say making it more of a formal process and more resilient. Yeah. Taking advantage of a technology that's been developed. It's mature. It has that resiliency. It has that security, and applying it to a system where we know functionally what we need to do, but applying that more formalized approach to it, I think, is going to be make it better.
So from a security standpoint, dealing with some of the collection planning and architecture, do you get involved with making the communication between satellites and ground stations more secure too?
No, that's really not our thing.
Ours is more about the planning and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
The other advancement in technology that we're doing that's a little cutting edge is on the machine learning side. We have a few different machine learning efforts. We finished an SBIR for NASA for autonomous fault detection and correction, and it was super successful first round. I mean, it was just a phase one that we did, and they were able to pull in data from the LADI mission and analyze that with the machine learning that we had, and we were able to catch the faults like months before they caught them in real life for that mission, and so it was really interesting to see the effectiveness of the machine learning.
And then we also used it for the object detection and change detection, right? So we did some work, and this was kind of tied to SPIMYSAT. So SPIMYSAT gives us access to all this imagery, and we did an SBIR where we showed that we could take that commercial imagery and do change detection and activity detection autonomously using machine learning and artificial intelligence. And the specific project we did was to identify fracking when fracking was going on. So this is like the oil fields, and there are a certain number of fracking fleets that are deployed around the U.S. There's a certain number, but there's 10 or 100 times as many sites as there are fracking fleets. And so to take images of the different sites and find the fracking fleets and determine where they're being used and when for fracking operations, and finding sites before fracking has occurred, finding sites that are actively fracking, and then identifying sites that have been fracked and now are in a post-fracking pumping phase. So
what imagery do you use for examples like that for machine learning? Because SPIMYSAT, as I know it, your customers, or at least the public, is able to purchase imagery in the tens of dollars instead of the hundreds, if not thousands of dollars. And for machine learning on top of imagery, the biggest challenge was always having this big cost barrier behind purchasing large amounts of imagery to even label imagery appropriately to create these machine learning algorithms, right?
Sure.
So, what was your approach to solving some of this?
Well, we use those same agreements that we have for SPIMYSAT and coordinated with the operators that, hey, we're doing this project. We want to use the same imagery. A lot of the satellite operators have in their license agreements, if you're going to be doing processing of their imagery to create products and then, sell them down the line, that they want a piece of that, right? And so you have to be careful and make sure you adhere to those agreements and those license agreements. But the initial availability of the imagery is similarly low cost, like it is in SPIMYSAT. And then you get into the details of, okay, well, if you're creating value-added products down the line, you have to make sure that you have the specific agreements with the operators for that as well.
Yeah, but for that fracking situation, we were able to get a certain number of images. We had an intern work with us to do some of the training for that, so that was low cost. And then, and so now we have it trained, and the people are interested in the fracking data. They can set their favorite location in SPIMYSAT, and so for each new image, they can get the object recognition, and then they're interested in it, and then that further trains the software and that type of thing. And we're taking that same technology, that object recognition that we started with that one SBIR for fracking, and we're extrapolating it. And so we did it for an SBIR for a little project. We're going to pull it into the SPIMYSAT app that's available to other people. We're going to make it so that we did a little bit of the machine learning ourselves, but we're going to make it so that other people who are experts in that and have other type of analytics, we can pull in third-party analytics. And then we're also going to take that same technology and bring it to the satellite. And so,
so on board the satellite, you
do
could
the action.
process the image, detect the event or detect the activity, and trigger follow-on activities by the satellite or other satellites.
Yeah, so that's some of that is just coming from our own R&D and taking, we're not just SBIR people. Like SBIR is like a place where they are looking for research and innovation and new ideas. And so a lot of times we've got the ideas and we apply it to the SBIRs. A lot of times we're taking the SBIRs and then we're moving forward. And the ones that we've talked about with machine learning and blockchain, those are moving forward on technology. But we've also taken our own suite of software and expanded our domain. So we have an interesting STTR actually that we did with the Navy. So we took our space software for collection planning and onboard autonomy, and we applied it to a fleet of unmanned underwater vehicles, or UUVs. And so now you have, you create a plan, you send it to the UUVs, but the maritime environment is very dynamic. And so we have onboard autonomy, the APS software running on this fleet of UUVs, and replanning in real time based on the dynamics of the situation. They talk back to a surface vehicle or USV or unmanned surface vehicle, and then that thing talks to data ferries that are UAVs. So you have the underwater, surface, and in air all working together. So that was a Navy STTR. And then there was a call from NASA for a similar type of thing. So we got a NASA STTR. So we applied our space stuff to the Navy, and then we took that to Mars. So in that STTR, we've got Martian surface vehicles, air, and space all working in collaboration. And then
that's a trip right there, right?
Yeah. And then we took that and applied it to the moon. So we were selected for another SBIR to take that same software, that same multi-domain approach, and apply it to the moon. And so now we have, again, surface, air, and space all working together for the moon and Mars. Now, if you can do it with underwater, the moon and Mars, with just a matter of like a little bit of configuration and like integration with the asset, we can also apply that to more other multi-domain aspects. So there have been a lot of calls lately. Titan is one that's come out. Tranche 0 is another one that's come out, where they're really looking, the U.S. government is looking for multi-domain planning and trying to get all those assets working together, trying to get things easy and non-stovepiped, as we've been talking.
So if you look at it kind of from a evolution point of view, you started out with kind of single asset planning, then you moved to multi-asset planning and constellation optimization, all in a single domain, and then you support heterogeneous set of assets in those single domains, and then you move to multi-domain, and that's kind of where we are now.
Awesome. Great progression for your company as a whole. So you mentioned a few things coming up. Any things, what specific projects are you most excited about in the near future?
I'm excited about that blockchain one. I think that's going to be interesting, and really excited about that DARPA work that we're doing for Blackjack, because we have the APS software. We've done a lot of work with that flight software on the ground and simulations, and with the Air Force, improving it in different test beds. But in late this year or early next year, it's actually going to go up on a satellite for DARPA Blackjack risk reduction mission. So we're going to have our apps on the ground tasking. We're going to have our web apps with the commander essentially controlling and seeing what's going on. And those requests are going to go up to the satellite, but we're not doing any planning on the ground. I keep telling our team, no, you got to stop. We're not doing any planning on the ground. Those components are not there. The target requests are going to go up to the satellite, and the satellite is going to figure out for itself how to collect those targets, image them, process them, and send it back down to the user. So that's going to be an exciting end-to-end flight mission.
The actual mission for that demo mission, because that's super cool.
Yeah, so it's a maritime domain awareness. So it's essentially getting inputs from commercial operators like Hawkeye 360,
So all the RF collectors out there that are emerging.
Yeah, so we're tying in the RF collectors, commercial RF collectors into this demonstration. They're going to queue us to specify target locations. Users can also specify their own target locations. Those targets are going to go up to the satellite, and they get uplinked in essentially near real time. So we not only have a standard kind of ground station contacts, but we also are going to have connection through a Globalstar network. So that anytime a user or we get a tip from Hawkeye 360 comes in, we can immediately get that target to the satellite. The satellite has a queue of those targets on board, and as APS is doing a rolling planning timeline, and as those access opportunities come up for those targets, it plans to collect them. It does its own deconfliction on board. Once those targets are collected, those images are collected on board, and these are maritime locations. They get processed on board by software from a company called Kitware to do that recognition of ships and classify the ships. And that generates events which get downlinked again in near real time through the Globalstar network. So we get immediate notification of, hey, say Hawkeye or someone said, hey, there might be a ship here that we want to look at. We take an image of that location on board, we process it, we confirm whether or not, yes, it's consistent with what we thought, we get that event down, and all that happens entirely autonomously.
Well, and some of it is even the tips, there's potentially an RF sensor on board.
Yeah, and so we're looking at using some of the additional sensors that are flying on board that satellite as way to do even more real-time target tipping. So we're working on some of that right now. So it's an exciting mission just overall, but it's especially exciting to see the work we've done on the flight software go to space. So.
Oh, amazing. So we have 20 minutes left. I want to get into some other topics here on the side. You are, to kind of reiterate what we introduced in the beginning, you are a husband and wife team working together. Can you talk about that dynamic and not just building the company, but how you all work together from a day-to-day standpoint?
Yeah.
Sure.
And how that relationship works.
Right. So we met in college. We both went to Cornell, and my degree is in mechanical and aerospace, and Alex is in applied and engineering physics. And I got the job first out of college near Houston, and Alex literally looked up aerospace in the phone book. He's like, Houston, come in Houston. Isn't there a space center near here? And he got the job there. And it was at JSC. And it was interesting because he'd come home from he was a flight controller there. He'd come home from his job talking about what he had done, which sounded boring to me, talking about the computer systems and these databases that the people had done and the new workstations. And he's like, and I'm like, no, that sounds great. And so I ended up switching from I was working at Dow Chemical to working at JSC, but like in a sister organization. So, I mean, even from the early days right out of college, he was doing flight operations, and I was helping the team build the systems for the next generation,
This was for Space Shuttle.
For Space Shuttle. And so, like, he was my operator, and I was his, like, computer person, and like, we bounced off of each other like that, and sort of working together, but not exactly working together. I think at some point our desks were like kitty corner from each other, but driving to work together every day and having like
complementary skill sets that
complementary. Right. Like we're not exactly the same person, but we work really well together. And it continues. When we started Orbit Logic, it was, Alex had all these different entrepreneurial ideas, and I'm like, why don't you just stick with space? That's what you know, do space. And then when he was working in the previous position and he was writing the proposals and he was managing the work and, making it all happen, I'm like, you've got enough that we can do our own company. But by the way, I'm going to keep my real job that pays me all the time. And I continued working sometimes in space and sometimes in software, learning the various different practices for software development. I went through plenty of agile training. I was a QA and test manager and director, and I actually worked at Blackboard for a little while and Rosetta Stone for a while, and I was working with web applications long before the space community was ready for that. And so I was bringing in this sort of corporate knowledge and various different things, and while Alex was doing day to day, and I would come in for marketing events. Like I've been going to Space Symposium since 2001, and I would come in for marketing events and I'd keep up with things. But in 2012, a position I was in ceased to exist at the company. Wasn't doing very well at the time. And so I started doing some stuff at OrbitLogic. And now instead of QA and test, I was doing more business development. And we had gotten to a point where the world was getting a little small. GOI and Digital Globe, who were big customers of ours, were now merging. And it was a little bit of a scary time. We had scheduler sales and we had those. And I worked with Alex to win that work. And so Digital Globe is still a big customer, or Maxar.
Maxar now,
It's still a big customer of ours. And I was winning that work. And I helped win the APS Phase 2. And so that SBIR, which is still going years later. And so it was like, can we actually work together? And then I'd be going to interviews and Alex would be like,
no.
You can't go to interview. I need you for this meeting.
That's right.
You have to develop this stuff.
But what's interesting is that, back in shuttle days, you're totally right. We had completely different jobs. She was like the computer support stuff, and I was the flight operations, right?
In payload operations.
Yeah, in payload operations for shuttle. But today, I would say we pretty much have the same job, but there's enough going on that, she'll focus on certain programs like, say, Landsat or Muses, and I'll focus on other programs like some of the Air Force work, Heimdall or SPIMESAT. But we both do business development, we both do marketing, we both do program and product management. But it's a good, we have different ideas and we kind of feed off each other for different programs. And it'll be like even on a single program, it'd be like, okay, well, I'll have the initial interaction and then you'll write the outline and then I'll fill in some of the details and then you'll edit it. And so it works really well. It used to be that we had separate offices back when offices were a thing, right? Back when people were working in offices, right? We had separate offices. Once you were there full time, we had the office. And it would be like we'd constantly be going back and forth to each other's office to bounce ideas off each other. And we're like, okay, this is stupid. And when we expanded the space, we actually took two offices and expanded it into one big office. And so now we both sit in the same room.
Yeah, we're never a whole lot farther apart than we are right now.
That's right.
And it does work really well. And it's kind of funny because in a lot of ways I'm more extroverted, so I'm the person who's going out and finding out what's going on and making the initial contacts with people. But then sometimes, like, I don't want to talk to the real person. But Alex is actually in some ways more introverted. He's like, I don't care what they think. I'll talk to them.
Well, good.
And then he will. And it's hard to get him to stop talking sometimes, as you can kind of see. And so he'll take over for a little while. But meanwhile, I am taking notes and I'm paying attention.
Yeah. Well, a good example of this is that, like, Space Symposium, back when conferences were a thing, you would go out and find an opportunity or someone to talk to, and you come back and you'd be like, okay, you have to go talk to this person. And then I would go over there and start that. But she was you would find the opportunity and then I would go, foster it a little bit, and then it would end up being a joint conversation. So it works well.
I do think that we're different than a lot of, you see a lot of wife and husband teams where one person is the domain expert and the other person's like, the business person, like they're finance or they're something else that they don't really know about the domain or whatever. But I don't think that's true for us. I think that Alex is slightly more spacey than I am, and I'm slightly more computery than he is. So, for a long time I worked on command and control systems. And so I can tell you all the different types of parameters that you can have for a command, but I can't tell you what the command is used for. And he knows he could write command procedures for some sort of a reason,
So I know we're talking about your husband and wife relationship here going on and how you manage the company, but I had a similar dynamic with, I had a coworker in my last company, that I worked with, and he was a senior software developer. And the guy was a genius, a practical genius, but he can pretty much make anything, but he had no idea what to make. And to be able to, and they stuck me in the same room with them. And I was as an imagery guy, as a guy who worked with the customer all the time, I had all these ideas, but I had no idea how to make it. So just him and I together were just, man, we were just bash out ideas and just full steam ahead with any type of demos and concepts and projects. It was a power team. So finding that right individual you can just put somebody else with, I think it's invaluable, and it kind of goes. I always like the aspect of putting people together that have completely different sides of the story. Somebody might have the customer view, someone might have a more technical aspect, and then they see how they complement and create that kind of synergy together. But you've taken it,
and there is a third owner. So Doug is our implementation guy, and especially in the very early days, Alex would promise all kinds of things, and Doug would actually make them happen and make them happen really well.
Well, that makes a big deal. You don't want to overpromise and not deliver, right?
Yeah, I think the fact that we have a bunch of follow-on work has kind of proven that we actually deliver on our stuff. You were asked about things that we're excited about, but JPSS came to us about a year ago asking for they have a system that was built very custom for them.
Yeah, a planning system.
A planning system, but it doesn't do,
among other things.
It only does the custom thing that it was built for. And they wanted to do more things, but it was very expensive to redo this custom software. And so they did a big trade study looking at various different mission planning and scheduling tools. And I love this quote, because they said that they didn't even score the trade study because we obliterated the competition. And so we started working with JPSS, and now JPSS has recommended us to a broader audience that we're not quite on contract with, but we're really close to being on contract for a bunch of other civil space work. And we've done Landsat and we did SGSS, both with General Dynamics, and JPSS has a certain General Dynamics as well. But it just shows that, once you get like a little bit in with somebody and you do a good job, that they like it.
The work continues. We've had a great partnership with Digital Globe, which is now Maxar, since like 2006, right?
No, even before, because space imaging and GeoEye.
Yeah, that's
all
true.
The way back,
started.
Our very first contracts were with Orbital, and then that's how we got into Orb-Image. And then that Orb-Image became GeoEye, and then GeoEye merged with Digital Globe, which is now Maxar.
You run the entire history of that company.
And we've been Orbit Logic the whole time.
Yeah, that's right. Our name hasn't changed.
Yeah.
But it's great. The new projects are great, right? The new technologies and new products. But what's also great is those, long-term customers you have great relationships with. And, Maxar is evolving. They're launching their Legion satellites. There's all kinds of stuff going on there. And
they're the container people.
Yeah. We're doing container stuff with them. And, we're continuing to work with them to evolve and enhance the system. So those long-term partnerships are equally exciting going forward, as they continue.
They do great stuff.
Yeah.
So in our last few minutes here, talk to me about the people in your company. You mentioned you have close to 50 people now.
50 plus. We a little lost track of the exact number. Do we have 50 or 52 or?
The people. So we're up to about 50 people. We have something like 7 different interns. Most of the people that work for us are systems engineers or software developers, and then on any given team we do agile kind of Scrum type of stuff. On any given team there will be somebody who is the product owner, and some of those are systems engineers, some of them are software developers who have moved up, and it's just a matter of what they want to do. So I had an interview the other day with somebody who was interested in being in a more diverse workplace. That she, like us, is used to aerospace, where every meeting you go to is 10 white guys and me. Whether that's me going to that meeting, or if Alex goes, it's 10 white guys and him as well. And so one thing that's interesting about Orbit Logic is that we do have women in every single role of the company, from software to systems engineering, business development. Our head of IT is a woman. Finance, marketing, every single role, every single position that we have has a woman in it. And it also, every stage, so we have interns to junior people to senior principal and myself as an owner. And, you know, it is hard to find people of color, but we do have a number of those, that kind of diversity. We have people from all over the country. We have our primary office is in the DC area.
Yeah,
whatever.
But we have 12 people out here in Colorado.
I think it's up to 15.
15.
We've lost track.
So you have lost track.
We have and Alex and I spend our summers in Colorado because we have a number of customers here. So we have a little bit of that geographic diversity as well as.
But what's you know, in a small company, and you know, we're 50 people, but that's still very small. In a small company, you can't afford to have people that are just there kind of taking up space, right? So we have a pretty rigorous interview process to go through for both systems and software. And I would say, you know, the amazing thing about Orbit Logic is we have so many really talented software developers and systems engineers that can get things done to the point where, you know, as you grow beyond, you know, at 50 people, and with 15 different projects going on at the same time, in addition to the product work, it's impossible for us as owners anymore to keep up with everything that's going on. But when you have good people like we have, that's okay. You can kind of start to let go of things.
And they drive so much. You know, the machine learning came from a couple guys who have come in or who were just interested in that. Yep. And they either learn it on the job or they brought it with them. The same thing for containers. We have a couple guys who, one guy's been with us for a long time, but he's interested in it and he's totally driving it. The blockchain.
And that was something originally that you were planning to get into, but that was just interest from internally.
Yeah. Because I mean, and that's what happens when you have really sharp people. You know, they're curious, they're interested, they want to move their own, you know, knowledge forward, and that helps push the whole company forward, which is great.
Yeah,
and I love that you're championing the ideas and concepts of your individuals, and I think a lot of people feel, especially in the defense, it's really common in defense industries that companies will just do your tasks, stick to what's on the contract. We don't have room. I mean, you have an idea, pass it up, and you as the creator of that idea never get to kind of see it after your head.
Even in our review process, we have, okay, here's your job. Here was your job last year. Here's your job going forward. How did you do? But then we have a whole section on initiatives. What are you interested in? You know, what new stuff?
How can you grow? And
right. How can you grow? And how can we help the company grow? Like, not your main job, but, you know, I want to do more automated testing, or I want to check out blockchain, or, you know, whatever, or machine learning. So all those kinds of initiatives are even kind of put into our review process because we want to talk about them and we want everyone to have the opportunity to grow and to help the company go in new directions and apply new technologies.
Yeah, but people have fun too. People are not working like massive amounts of time. We've won awards for workplace flexibility. And we had that previously, where it's so funny to talk about this now because people would do things like they'd have to take time off to go to events at their child's school. That's not happening anymore. Or they'd have to pick somebody up from the airport. Not happening anymore. They need to take their mom somewhere. You're not taking old people. You're not hanging out with your old people anymore. None of this is happening. So they're finding different ways. But that flexibility is also, first of all, we had the flexibility to work from home, and we had practiced with snow days.
We had our snow day dry run last year.
Snow day dry runs where everybody would be working from home. And so when the pandemic hit, it was super easy. We have like Slack-like channels where people are chatting anything from, hey, what's the test status on this, to what's this bug, to, hey, how do I get my sourdough starter to work?
But the whole, you know, our IT group had put together and enhanced our VPN and network capacity so that we could handle everyone at the company working at home at once. And that was put in place after we kind of had a little bit of a disaster at some of those snow days, like a year or two ago. And then we went in, we grew, we enhanced that IT and network and VPN, and now we were ready when the pandemic hit.
And the latest
This didn't really affect you a whole that much.
no.
So actually, on that note, though, did you actually have physical offices that you rented out, or was
Yeah, we have our main offices in Greenbelt, Maryland. We have about 40 people out of that office. And of course, we shut it down at the pandemic. We're just now talking about opening it back up and letting people go back there with, different kind of process and procedures. But
here in Colorado.
And here in Colorado, we've been using shared office space. So we have,
which is where we are right now.
Yep. So there were offices in Boulder and Denver that people could come into and collaborate when they wanted to, when they weren't working at home. And so we kind of transitioned from everyone being in an office or in the collaborative shared space to everyone working at home, and now we're slowly kind of figuring out how to filter back.
And one of the cool things from today is in DC they had a big power outage at the building today. There's been a lot of storms and a lot of difficulty, and with the heat and everything, there was a huge power outage, and so the IT people were trying to come in, but we now have a robot in our office.
That's right.
In DC. And so the robot went over and looked at the racks of equipment.
Well, the IT people were locked out. When the power went out, it locked all the doors.
Oh, is that right?
And so they couldn't get in, but they activated the robot and they drove it around, and they could hear the alarms going off, like the power outage alarms, through the robot's ears. And they were able to look at the racks and do that. So that's our newest employee.
Yeah.
What is he called?
The robot.
Tweaking a robot is our newest employee.
Yeah.
Nice. Well, I want to appreciate both of you coming on and talking about your experiences, the company, yourselves for that matter, during your lunch period. And it's been a huge pleasure getting to know you and what you've been up to.
Great. Well, thanks for having us on. This has been fun.
Yeah.
Well, everybody, thanks for listening. You can for the post-edited version of this, the video will be up on projectgeospatial.com or our YouTube channel. Hashtag Let's Talk Geo, but always look for the lunch with LX, lunch talk with LX, and that'll be up within the next few minutes. Thanks everybody for listening.